Yeah, hello and welcome to back to ConWorxx Day 2. And it's almost over. ConWorxx is almost done, but almost because I'm back in fanboy mode here again. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome Drew and Cole Wehrle to ConWorxx, and I hope both of you are all right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We are so happy to be here.
Thanks for having us, Uli.
Yeah, so yeah, it's really my pleasure. Although I now have a little bit of an echo, but now I'm not hearing it anymore. So it's fine. You are together right now in St. Paul, right?
That's right. Yeah, Drew comes up here I don't know, every 6 weeks or so, and we get to spend the weekend working on different projects, and I show him things that I'm working on, and he tells me to edit them, which is good. And he gets to see the family and things. So this is it just happens that you've caught us on one of our trips.
But it's wonderful seeing you together. I hope everything really is all right. You did not attend GenCon, right? And seeing
Yeah, I did.
you.
I was at Play Modena, um, which I was really impressed with how they ran it. I think I was skeptical about coming back to shows this early, but they did a really good job running that show. It felt very safe and lots of really good protocols.
Yeah, and we're really lucky that we don't. We're not the sort of publisher that has to go to these sorts of shows.
Right.
So we're in a place of privilege. But this weekend is a little bit of us getting to play some games that we would have otherwise gotten to enjoy over at a convention.
Yeah, that is good playing some games. The main topic for today will be John Company second edition. But please, if you have questions or comments in the chat, please put them in the chat window, and we will answer. Most probably, these two guys will answer this, and this is another good thing is that the guests do all of the work or almost all of the work here at ConWorxx, so I can enjoy and fall back into my fanboy mode. And there is Gorky CQ saying hi, and yeah, and saying nice T-shirt, Cole.
Oh,
Indeed,
thank you.
it's
You can get your game's website right now.
so it's available. It's available. It's available. And there's designer Evan Horbert, and he's saying hi guys or hey guys. So yeah, good seeing you there. And we will talk about other things probably too. So, but John Company should be for the next 57, 56 minutes should be the main topic for today. So please start because I'm curious as well. I'm really curious.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, where do you want to start?
where do I want to start? I want to start with um, this was the project that we really wanted to do when we started Whirligig.
Right.
We knew we wanted to do Premiere first because we didn't feel comfortable doing something this big right away by ourselves. But more or less, the moment Premiere was done, the second edition of Premiere was done, we started working in earnest on the second edition of John Company. Um, John Company, the first edition of the game is very special to me, but it was also a game that I had worked on it for a really long time, but it had been finished at a time of kind of personal duress. I was finishing my dissertation. We were moving across the country. I was trying to find work. And all those things were happening at the same moment. I had a friend who would came visit in the last days of working on John Company, and he would help me pack my house. And then in the evenings, we would work on John Company. And I submitted those files for publication hours before I got into a moving truck and drove across the country. So there was no time to celebrate.
But in the last 10 years, you haven't had a computer that hasn't had some sort of John Company related file on it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so we had, Drew and I, after we finished Premiere, but even before we knew it would be well received, we thought, okay, let's start thinking about what John Company looks like. And we kind of started with the same sorts of questions we had with Premiere, which is, what if this game could take any form, what is the form that it takes? And this is a really important question for us because we don't want to say, well, we normally make miniatures games. And so here's John Company with minis. We wanted to say, what is the essential character of this game? And what is the way that is going to make it more accessible, more playable, more beautiful than it was previously? And the previous edition had lots of compromises. In fact, John Company was originally an entirely card game because the publisher had wanted to fit it in one of those small Premier-style boxes for the first edition. And it took a lot of lobbying to make it kind of a double wide and to make it a long, skinny box. But that core John Company board puts a lot of information in a 4-fold format. I knew that I only had 60 cards to work with. I only had a certain, like 100 cubes or so. So every element of the design had compromises to the game's profile. And one of the biggest compromises was we knew that because of shipping rates, we had to keep it under 1 kilogram. And so actually, I cut the rules down because we were worried about paperweight. And if you have a copy of John Company on your shelf that is in shrink still, if you weigh it, you'll find that it is almost perfectly 1 kilogram. There's a spare couple grams to be found. So with the second edition, thankfully Drew and I don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. And so we really started thinking about what are the big topics, the arguments? How do we want the game to feel for the players? And then are there places where we can revise the design? And it began, like all these second editions, as very, very minimal revisions to the design. And of course, by the time we're working on the parts of the game we're working on now, the design has been dramatically overhauled. And so basically every element of John Company has been tinkered with or adjusted in some way. And the short and fast version of what changed is that the game is much easier to teach.
It's much easier. Good thing. It's a really good thing.
John Company is a complicated game. It's more complicated than Premier, but it's pretty easy to teach. Strangely enough, I think there's an argument that it's the easiest game that I've ever made to learn because it holds your hand. It sort of teaches you how to play while you're playing it.
The first round.
Yeah, the first round just sort of teaches you how the game works. And the individual mechanisms are pretty simple, and the objectives are pretty simple. And so we wanted to do those things. And then we also wanted to really put some development resources into all the scenarios and to some of the parts of the design that were exciting ideas that may not have been as fully fleshed out. And so this game has gotten a ton of testing.
I think it goes to the exact core of why we started Wehrle Gig, which was to take our time and to see the project out, not to an arbitrary deadline or to a distribution deal contract or anything like that, that it was dictated by the project.
Yes.
And as the project sort of necessitated the scale that it ended up at, that it's currently at. The space to be sort of fully realized. And some parts of that have been bigger than we realized, and others have been a lot more straightforward with its development.
Yeah, it is interesting how the development of the game is a real grab bag of some very obvious things that we had to do, and then some other problems that were not obvious and that took we would sweat about whether a number should be 3 or 4 for months. We're still finishing that process in some small respects, and then all that design stuff is kind of one aspect of this game, which again we started working on right after Premiere, and then at the same time we started thinking about the physical object that we wanted to make, and here we used Premiere as our kind of guiding light because we knew we wanted a bookcase game in that kind of old Avalon Hill format, a smaller box that was very dense with things. It will probably be a little bit deeper than Premiere's box because there's just a lot more in this box. And then we went through and we basically said, the original John Company could tell these really rich stories, but they required a level of abstract thinking from the players. And were there places where, by spending a little bit more money, either on art or on the physical production, we could increase the immersion of the game. So one example, I'll just reach over here. The original game uses cubes as your family members, and they're fine. They work really well. But for the new edition, because every cube is an actual person with their own personality, we commissioned sort of 18 cameos.
Looking great. Yeah.
On a kind of a thick wood, and when you look at a game of John Company, you can see the family history and how much it is a game about people and not just about institutions. And so it did a lovely thing, just adding to the character of the game. And so it was the kind of thing that when we looked at the budget of the project, it was well, this is going to be expensive, but this is exactly the kind of investment we wanted to make.
Yeah, and I think actually, Will, you just had Space Biff on previous, and I think about, I think he may have got right to it with one of his first previews about the complicity of the families, of the individual actors doing their job, and I think putting a face and putting some of the family portrait has really helped make, thematically, through some of the aesthetic choices that we've done in this new edition, really tie it in together.
Because we really want it to look like, in the way that Pamir took its aesthetic cues from sort of Persian courtly games, we wanted this to draw a lot from Victorian board games as its kind of like aesthetic foundation. And so we did a lot of work on designing the components to have a early 19th century like aesthetic, and those little cameos help because it looks like a Victorian board game or a big magazine spread. And so it was really important when we were finding artists to work with that they could mimic that style, and then and this has also been a project that has required us to go outside to find artists. Usually I find myself doing a lot of the icons myself, and a lot of the layout, but we've actually brought in a kind of small staff of artists, including some folks based in India to help with some of the assets related to how the subcontinent is portrayed. And the whole thing is really starting to finally come together.
Yeah, and really, the kind of passion you're putting into this is showing here. And as Drew said, you're not thinking about how many of these copies can be put into the distribution market and then resell it, but thinking this is a product, and now we want to make the best possible product, and then we will see what's possible within these limits. And this is, in my opinion, much better. I'd like to two things here quickly. If you can, please try to check the audio, because sometimes you're very loud and sometimes real low volume. So it's okay, but if you can improve or try to improve this would be great. And we are having some comments here in the chat window. There's Ludias, he's saying, hello Whirlies, great to see you again after last year. And there is Martina. Hello Martina, hello guys, like to hear everything new about John Company. So they started already, so you will you will learn everything. And Cludius is also saying my version, so his version of John Company, has a meeple upgrade, but the boards are too small for them. It worked out okay, but I think now we are seeing no compromises. You do the game that you want to do. So yeah, sorry for this interruption here. And so we
no. So we have to. Drew and I have a hanging microphone, so we have to make sure we speak to it. So one thing that I think has impacted both Drew and I is we grew up playing mostly secondhand games. You know, one of the most important gifts I ever received was from an uncle. Gave me a copy of Chancellorsville and Tactics II and a variety of other early Avalon Hill war games that I barely understood the rules, but they were playthings, and we did a lot of experimenting with them and you know, playing little scenarios and things. But you know, I remember garage sales where we found copies of Hero Quest, but most of the games that we were playing were from kind of a generation or even two generations older than our own play experiences. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I love about working in games is that these are physical objects that last a really long time.
Yes.
And so when you listen to the discourse around games, sometimes people really talk about, you know, is this game feel modern? Why would you ever play a game from before 2010? Or, you know, the say things like, well, all the new designs are so much cleaner. And from the publishing side, you always want to be publishing what's new, what's cutting edge. Those are the things that are going to sell the best. And I can sympathize with it and understand it, especially when I'm thinking it from the perspective of Leader Games. However, on the other hand, sometimes you find a book that's 50 years old and it still reads. And games have really long material histories. This is actually one reason why I find myself not interested in app-driven games. I don't really to me, I have no strong feelings about the gameplay and the design, but from the physical object, from the perspective of the half-life of the physical object, I've just spent too much time in research libraries to think that like the games will have a very long
Mm.
And when I was working on Oath, I would think about like, imagine some kid in 50 years stumbling into a copy of Oath.
Mm.
Like, I want that to be a magical moment,
Mm.
and I'm not going to make any money off that off that moment. That doesn't matter. What matters is the physical object has this
Yes.
life that's beyond it.
Yeah, and related to second-hand copies, or is this your own copy? I'm seeing to your right here, Cole, I'm
Yes.
seeing Freedom in the Galaxy, which is more than 40 years old because SPI
Yes.
went down in the early 80s, so this is late 70s. And I played this fairly recently as well, so I immediately thought, well, is this Freedom in the Galaxy? Yeah,
Yeah. I'm working
it's
on a science fiction game right now, so I'm doing my research. I also have Imperium sitting on that stack and Zargos Lords beneath it.
is it, yeah, wonderful games. Is Imperium from GDW? So which
Yes.
companies? Yeah, I played but this is a long time ago
Yeah,
that
these are very.
I played that one. But still, good games, not only at their times, but very interesting games nowadays within their limits. SPI, paper maps, tiny, small pieces, but still, if you have invest that effort into it, still lovely products.
Well, and I come to the hobby, I think, with I don't know, a scholarly bent, if I'm being kind to myself, and I like, so if I'm working on a game, I want to read up and see what everyone else is doing or whatever everyone else has done before I know what sort of intervention I can even make in the conversation. And so usually when I start working on a project, the first thing I do is scare up, a dozen games from all sorts of periods just to get a sense of how people at different times have thought through this. I mean, one of the remarkable things about Freedom of the Galaxy, for instance, is that game was designed basically. It was co-designed along with the development and release of Star Wars. It's not a Star Wars game, but it basically came out like a year or two later.
Look at the cover.
And so much of how people think about science fiction is inflected by experiencing the Star Wars movies and experience video games. And so to go back to a world where before that cultural hegemony had happened and see how are they thinking about science fiction at this time. It's a little bit like playing a fantasy war game before Dungeons and Dragons or before computer RPGs. They have a completely different I think that's what's so remarkable about a game like Magic Realm.
Yeah.
Like Magic Realm is the design is all over the place, but it is so interesting because it doesn't. It's just not influenced by computer RPGs the way I feel like every open world adventure RPG I've played in my own upbringing was like, oh, they really like Baldur's Gate and they transpose some of the systems.
Right.
Yeah, right. And we have some comments here in the chat. And NBSP1618 is saying if he hasn't, Cole should check out Weapon Starship. And I think this is a game by West End Games. I'm not sure, but maybe you can confirm this in the. It may be even, but I'm probably wrong. This is a game by Greg Kostikian. But I may be wrong. But Weapon Starship, I think it's West End Games. But we are having some more specific questions on John Company. So Gorky CQ is asking. Was there any attempt to connect the system of alliances, currently about hiring mercenaries, to the empires that grows and shrinks on the board? And it seems to me like, especially later on, the company lived and died on shifting alliances with those local empires. Am I reading wrong, or was I getting too complicated, not the right level of abstraction with this event in India system? So a very specific question. I think it's a great question here.
Provide some context for people who might not have played the second edition yet. So, by the way, you can play the second edition now. It's in the very final stages of testing. It's on the Steam Workshop. You can play it on Tabletop Simulator. We have a very active testing community on the Wehrle Gig and Friends Discord. It's very easy to find games. And so this is a question about an interesting element. In the first edition, you could hire mercenaries to supplement your armies. And mercenaries, I hated that term because people imagined it as soldiers of fortune. And they were, but they were mostly based in India. So they weren't like Hessians or something. And so I never liked the term mercenary because it's a very strong word, especially in the Western mind. And so people always think about like Blackwater defense contractors or something. And that's not what they were at all. It was like, no, you've convinced like the local political heads in Orissa to support you, is what the mercenaries are. So I got rid of this because I felt like it didn't have the right bite thematically, and replaced it with these local alliances on the board. Now the local alliances are static; they never change. They're over the course of the board. I think there's 8 of them or something like that, and they can be hired. They will work with you, and then they go back away. And these local alliances are currently unhinged from the game's political system. And I badly want to connect them because the commenter is absolutely right that the shifting alliances in the empires influenced how the smaller princely states behaved. Sometimes it worked for the British's favor, and sometimes it worked against them, and the princely states were able to arraign power against the company and build kind of their own little lobbies. But in the scale of the game as it exists right now, there's no clean way to do it.
But in the redevelopment, we used some of that complexity to and space that we could add specifics to the game by now bringing in some of these local alliances and giving them name and identity in place in the way that the first edition never had that specificity. And also, this is being further abstracted by the towers and how the event system is also bringing in the like emergent empires too. So like that is looped up.
It is. It's just it's one of those issues where, and this is what the commenter is getting to, especially if they're already present in the Discord, is John Company's development is in the most dangerous stage right now. And I know this.
What is the most dangerous state? I'm immediately curious here. What is it?
Because when the game is done, or very close to being done, you're mostly like all your playtesters that have gotten their dopamine rushes from the steady introduction of new things. And we've gotten to the end of the road on this one, and they want the game, they don't want the show to end, and I don't want the show to end. So we start overcooking, and we start tinkering and introducing ideas because as people who've played the game 30 times or 20 times perhaps, you want something new.
Yeah.
And it becomes very easy to forget the people who are just starting out. And so I've been trying really hard to not change the game, even though I want to introduce little trade bureaus and all sorts of like funny little details into the design. But I'm having to really stop myself because this is a place where designs can really mire themselves. It's in that I think that a lot of times I always see in development 2 very common pitfalls. One very, very common pitfall is when the design locks too early and people run into development problems, but they feel like they can't address the foundational design because they don't want to redo it. And I think that is a very common mistake that developers make. And the other problem is when the design gets extremely cooked and that they feel like they want to keep introducing things to keep it fresh for them. And what happens is they're adding rules and the whole thing gets a little like heavy.
Yeah, and
I've experienced both of those problems. I know many people who have.
Yeah, and here in Europe, I totally can confirm this. I think you are totally right. And here in Europe, in the Euro type genre, we see an additional problem that you have this great design. It's a rough diamond, and it has its edges. It's not perfect, but to balance everything, to that everybody has the same chances. So you polish it and you polish it, and suddenly it has no edges anymore. You think it's fine, but it's before that it was that big, and then it's that small afterwards, and this is also dangerous. But let me thank you, NBSP, because yes, Weapon Starship is by West End Games. And I'm having another question here for you, both of you. Seamus J is asking, hi Cole, hi Drew, looking forward to receiving John Company 2.0. My question relates to new books on the British Empire and whether any new literature has fed into the writing and or mechanics into the game. A specific book I have recently enjoyed is Empireland. Have you read it?
Oh, I have not read it. I don't know Empireland. Well, I'll put it on the list. It's not too late. The second edition One of the things that Drew did with company money, this was a fun thing that I don't think we about, is we bought, using some of the PAX Premier money, a lot of books,
Yeah.
like maybe 20
Yeah,
books about the British Empire. And the testing Discord was actually very helpful and exposing me to new things. One of the ones I very much enjoyed was called The Company State. And the authors, I completely forget right now. But The Company State was so interesting. It's the period, it really covers the period right before what the game covers. But it talks a lot about the legal and behavioral and kind of like structural frameworks that then informed how the company grew the way it did. So it said, if you think about everything that happened to the East India Company, and if you believe that, the structure of an organization can determine how it behaves, let's look at how it was structured in something like 1680 or in 1708, before it has really any territory holdings. And it was a fascinating book. It's a little academic and dry, but I thought very lovely.
I think from a couple years ago, maybe 2019, that's when I read Insurgent Empire from Verso, which was right around the time that we were redoing a lot of how the unrest cubes are working and how the Sepoy uprising, as illustrated in that book, played into the relationship with the governor office. Was a part of that. That's one of the newer books.
Yeah, and then there's another one. There's a book called, I think, Empire at Home, which was just about the different manors and the different estates. That was really cool, and it really helped tie some of the material history to what was brought back to England, to everything else. And then, of course, I really enjoyed Dalrymple's Anarchy, which I didn't have when I first did the game, and it's a lovely book about really about. It's an interesting book because it's quite narrow, really. I mean, it's really just about 40 years or so in Prime, but covers the political crises that led to the East India Company takeover of Bengal, and then from there, most of the subcontinent. And it's really, really remarkable, especially for people who want to learn more about the politics of the princely states and how they interacted with British actors. So, yes, absolutely tons of reading was done for this. And really, I think I didn't find anything that completely changed my thinking on any particular subject. I did more reading about Parliament and 18th century parliamentary history, and that has been reflected in the game's new law system. But other than that, it was more like a lot of the readings, instead of being like revelations, were just deepenings of existing arguments.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. And Seamus J, maybe you can add the author of Empire Land here and can name it so that we can follow up. And some more comments, of course. And Björn is saying, I'm pretty excited for the unannounced space game Cole is working on. And Martina, who's Björn's much better half, is immediately saying, you are excited for every game Cole is working on. So, yeah, let's see here.
Yeah, I will start sharing things about the space game in a month, maybe. And then hopefully this will be a Q1, Q2 Leader Games Kickstarter project.
Wow.
Drew got to play it.
I did. I feel like I've always played Cole's games that he has worked on. I feel like I'm the rogue developer behind the scenes of theater projects, where I just get to just poke and prod from a distance. And I'm excited. You should be excited too.
Yeah, I'm really, I'm very happy. I'm not going to say much.
Oh yeah, we can't.
I can't, but it's a project.
You can. Nobody is listening anyway. It may be me,
Well,
but nobody else. So you can
have weird relationships with my previous work, because I'll finish a game and I don't even want to look at it. I really need a break. And so every game I do is always a reaction to the previous thing. So Premiere Second Edition was very much a reaction to Root. Oath was very much a reaction to Premiere Second Edition. John Company is a reaction to a million things. But this game is really a reaction to thinking through some problems that Oath encounters and that Root encounters, and the broader space of thematic games. It's both the simplest project I've done at Leader Games. It is lighter than Root, and it may also be the biggest one at the same time. I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a tease. I'm a tease.
You are teased.
Yeah, this is a great tease. So just to repeat, so probably Q1 of next year, you'll announce a game or the game will move to Kickstarter and it's at Leader Games, right?
Yes, that's the Leader Games title.
So this is enough of information to get me excited here.
Follow
So
me.
well done, well done. And Björn is saying, of course, he is excited because Cole always pushes the boundaries of game design. Yes, I really agree. And Gorky CQ is coming back to your comments. By mercenaries, I mean the local alliances system in John Company 2. And yeah, I was getting at attempts to connect local alliances with the empires of towers on the board, but I don't have an idea on how to do that. And you kind of get it at it with the event in India. Probably easier to have that discussion on the Discord, most probably, but there could be an event card about negotiating a non-aggression pact with a specific empire of towers on the board. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of design space in there. I always, sometimes when I'm talking about design, I'll describe it as like a floor, and different parts can bear more load, right? And so there are certain parts of the design that I cannot put any more rules there. There's too many rules in those spots. The invasion and conquest rules are one area like that. But there are other places in the design where we can interact with them. One little comment I'll make about them is the core problem with attempting to tie the local alliances and the empires and the event frameworks together is that if I'm trying to be historical, things often behaved in opposite ways. So sometimes they behaved in a way that was, let's say, polarizing, and other ways they were playing in a way that was unifying. And so I want to capture that complexity. The system has to be able to do different things at different times, which means that it's better suited to something like an event deck than a fundamental system, but we'll see. There's still a little bit of time left. We have like maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks before final design lock on the game.
Right.
And I'm also excited about this because Spielworxx is doing the German edition, and I'm excited at a certain point to get files. But I totally think it's very good that you try to get the best game possible. And when you're happy, I will be happy as well. Yeah. So all is good. And I think Burr Hamilton, that's Christoph, isn't this? Maybe this is the wrong handle. He's saying the Anarchy literature back, the Anarchy by William Dalrymple. Is this correct? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. And Seamus J is thanking you. Great answer. And the author of Empireland is Thasnam Sangara. So probably he is from India or one of the surrounding countries, and sorry for my bad pronunciation, most probably. So thank you for adding the author's name here. I really appreciate this. And Claudius is asking, so we are changing course here a little bit, but I'm putting in this question here. Everything's fine. May I ask if there are news about a possible and infamous Traffic 2.0? So are there...
So, I have in my possession 2 copies of Infamous Traffic in shrink. I will be breaking that shrink the moment we're done with John Company to start working on the new edition. This is a funny thing, and I'm sure Uli knows all about it. After you finish a game, you sometimes lose your copy of the game. You gave it away and forgot that it was your last copy of that particular game. And so for a while, I had no copy of Infamous Traffic. And right before the contract expired with Amabel Holland, I asked her if she could send me a couple of copies of the game. And I wanted to open them up, but I've kept them in shrink. And I am very honored to have several extremely passionate Infamous Traffic players in town, in the Twin Cities, who have lots of opinions about the second edition, who have played the game 50 or 60 or 70 times and have lots of feelings about it. But I cannot think about it now. What I would like to do is, after we're done with John Company, I will start working on Infamous Traffic. It will take a bit because these things take time. I do think in the back of my head, and I realize this is going to sound laughable, I do think it won't be a dramatic second edition. But
this is great. This is...
I've always said that. But while that's happening, we are also potentially going to pursue a couple other titles as well. And Infamous Traffic might get bundled with them, might happen just after. There are a few exciting things that are kind of happening behind the scenes. But I want to revisit Infamous Traffic.
Yeah, we have every intention to.
Yeah, we have every intention to. What I realized, especially working on John Company, is that I want. Originally, I had kind of pictured it as a sequence of games about the British Empire. And working on John Company has made me very aware of the fact that it wouldn't feel right to end that sequence with Infamous Traffic. And so I'm now imagining a much larger series that could take, a decade in execution if I'm lucky enough to work on it that long. And, Infamous Traffic is just another important chapter in that larger sequence. And I think it's the one that needs done next, at least for my own efforts. So it is coming. And I think, I'm hoping that it will, that the standard that we've been able to hold for Premiere and for John Company is going to hold too for this.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, it is such a privilege to be able to work on these kind of like authoritative versions of the game. And as we were saying, and as I was saying earlier, development's hard and it's easy to make mistakes. There's no reason why a second edition will be better than a first edition.
Absolutely.
Examples of games which are hurt by their second editions. And so every time I feel like we land a second edition, I always have a sigh of relief. Like, we might not have made it through that one. And in fact, when we were John Company, we've been working on we're into the second or third year. And there were times in the first year, especially, where Drew would look at me and be like, I just don't know if it's actually better than the first edition. And so I said, okay, well, we're going to go back to the drawing boards because we won't do it. Our interest really is not to sell it. Our interest is to make something worth selling. And we want to hold Traffic to that same standard.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. And talking about an Infamous Traffic, there's another comment here in the chat, and Andre is saying, please keep an Infamous Traffic as cutthroat as it is now. This is the most brilliant part of the game. And to this, I would like to add, from my point of view, an Infamous Traffic is maybe the best game out there right now. I'm not saying compared to that game compared to this to that game. Yes, of course, the physical presentation can be improved, rules can be improved, and all this. But I think if you really plan to change the game for a second edition in some ways, try. This is my personal point of view. I'm not saying what you should do. Is try to keep inside that package a version that is almost true to the original edition, because it's a wonderful gaming experience, and you can play.
And there is a cleanness to Traffic that not John Company or Premiere. So when I was first working at Premiere, one of the first things I did was I just rewrote the rulebook from memory. I just said, okay, how does Premiere work? Like, I wasn't trying to change any rules. I just thought, I just want to just write the rules again. And it was interesting because as I did that process, and I wasn't using any references, I was just typing it from a blank page. And what I found was oh, these two systems don't make any sense. They should be one system. And when I imagined and John Company had a very similar process where as I started just writing the rules from memory, I was like, oh, I don't like how these rules are sitting. This is clumsy. I can feel myself being a little rushed or not knowing the right path through. With Traffic, there are things about how the rules are structured that can be cleaned up dramatically. But the core design is actually, I think, just pretty clean. And I like to imagine, especially after spending 2.5 years on John Company, I like to imagine that Traffic will not take this long, because I have dreams about John Company now, and I badly want to get through
No, I will be developing alongside you for Infamous Traffic, and it's going to be as cutthroat as ever.
Oh yeah. And we also want it to be, when we think about, although we do respect the craft and prioritize it, we also are thinking about our line, and our line positions these three games as being Infamous Traffic is probably the cleanest and simplest in terms of its rules, and then Premiere, and then John Company. And I think that kind of ranking will hold for the new editions as well as the old.
So this is a great statement. So people can see where the games are. So this is wonderful news to me and apparently to Andre as well. So great. But getting back to John Company here. So you mentioned you wanna finish the design up. Do you have? And I'm not putting any pressure here, of course. When do you think your work has been done on the game, your design work and development work?
The test that I usually use is where it's sort of a simple test, but it's the test where you play it and you don't want to change anything.
Mm.
And I think it's funny. What will happen is I'll start getting to that point, and I think we're about there now.
Yeah.
Like it's just the last few games of John Company I've played, there's basically like one or two outstanding issues that are so small that if I were to describe them in detail, I'd seem like a madman.
Well, it's a question. There's always things you want to change after each playtest, but you're looking at the aggregate scale of the things that you want to change, and the things that we've been wanting to change have gotten smaller and smaller. To the point that they're now so small that if we didn't change anything, it would be so close to the previous version that we just played that it's actually ready to be published.
Drew visited about a month ago, and when he came, I lamented the fact that I hadn't had a chance to update my kit. I was like, oh, I haven't updated my physical kit. And Drew said, well, nothing has changed in the last month outside of a few numbers. So like your kit is still completely playable. And so, usually what's happening is the scale of change is going smaller and smaller. And then once it starts getting low, I know because I'm doing the layout and I'm coordinating with the factory that I need to pick an actual production window. And once I do that, there's no question about tinkering forever. I know that if I need to make rulings on 4 issues, they need to be ruled on by these days. I give each of them a week of consideration. Like I don't get sentimental about it. I have worked with designers before who love like tinkering.
Yeah.
Even after the game's out, they want to tinker with it more.
Yeah,
but no, I've never been that way. And like, and Oath is an interesting example of that. We've had almost no errata on Oath, and I have no desire to like go back and revisit it. I'm happy to play the game, and I really enjoy it. But it's not a game where I feel like I still want to keep just sort of working on. And so what that means for John Company in terms of schedule is that we're in a place where the design will probably be done completely by the end of October, and file layout will take about another month or so, and that gives time for our artists to finish things. And then we have pre-press, and our hope is that we have everything ready for production, so that right after Chinese New Year it goes into production.
Yeah.
And that actually will allow us to bring in Uli and our other language partners much earlier in the process than normal, because we are going to get like everything pretty much ready to go.
These are great news, and I think you're doing it absolutely correctly in this regard. And by the way, more support and more confirmation for both of you regarding an infamous traffic from Andre and Claudia. They are saying, good to hear that there aren't that many changes. Super. So yeah. So everybody is happy here. We can now finish this. Everybody is happy. Let's play some games.
Our secret is we do the obvious thing.
Right.
We don't try to do anything too fancy.
We listen.
Yeah, we listen. Yeah,
but this is wonderful. So people, of course, the Kickstarter is over for John Company. This campaign is long over. But there will be interest not only in localized language editions, but also in English language editions. So people who are looking to get John Company right now, are there late pledges from Wehrle Gig, and how can people do this?
Yeah, so John Company is still open for late pledges, which you can find on our website or at the John Company Kickstarter. And we will keep late pledges open until early next year.
Good.
Because we decided to shift production to afford us a little bit more time with file prep and with spending a bit more time with our artists on some of the layout. It's affording us to also still keep the pledges open a little bit longer too.
And we should say, our general philosophy when it comes to late pledges and things like that is Sometimes we will slowly scale up the late pledge costs towards MSRP, so that sometimes happens. Just so when we actually get the game, we will continue to sell it at MSRP, just because we don't want to undercut any of our retail partners. And it's our hope that these games stay in print for as long as we stay in operation. So don't feel like if you don't get a copy of John Company in the next month, you're not going to get it. We will do everything we can to make sure that you're going to be able to get that game eventually. But the main thing is that we're a small operation, and we're pretty small with our print runs, which means if you miss one, you might have to wait a year or so to get
Yeah.
It's sometimes harder to articulate how adamantly we want to keep this a small operation, because it truly is still Cole and I just working on these games. And I think you and I often want to avoid the pressure of bringing on other people into these projects to sustain. At any point in time, we could say, no, John Company needs more time, and like this is still the project. And having that sort of control really allows the projects to dictate the size and scope of the company itself, which is really like lucky. And I think that's because of the size.
Yeah, and we're in the position. This sounds like a wild thing to say, but we kind of try not to grow, because so much of our process is bound up in the fact that we can stop working if we need to take a break and get a refresh, and we can drill down on a couple very insignificant details. And I love working for a game company. I adore it. But I do know that when you're working for a company, Leader Games has about 14 people, and there's a lot of inertia. Like, we have schedules that we have to keep to, and we have big projects that we're working on, and that kind of work is exciting, but it also makes me even more happy that Whirligig has stayed so small.
Yeah, and I can, from Spielworxx, from my experience, I can totally understand this. So I work for large companies, medium-sized companies, and now I'm here basically alone. Of course, I need all the help from several other people who are freelancers, but this is a different kind of pressure than having to pay paychecks each and every month, because this means suddenly it's not you who is doing this project, but there are other people dictating, no, this has to be released at a certain point. And this doesn't make it a bad game or a bad product, but it's a different world suddenly. And I think also, thank you, Cole, for mentioning we don't want to grow, because in a way, I think, and this is now going a little bit away from John Company, but so forgive me, please, here. I think everybody in a way wants to grow, wants to. This is also natural in human beings, in my opinion. But this is the main failure of capitalism. This is a system error of capitalism. Not everybody can grow, and each and every year it's impossible, especially with the growing number of people on this planet. So resources are not in finite. It's simply impossible. So I love to hear this statement, and of course within limits. And
There's a funny, interesting thing, because there's a conversation among publishers right now about environmentally sustainable practices, and one of the most environmentally sustainable practices, one of the best things you can do, almost better than anything else, is just produce less.
Yeah,
because
right.
like there's a weird kind of calculus that happens, but getting recycled paper or really well sourced wood, that's big, and that's nice, but that might be less important than mailing less packages.
Yes.
Because of just how much gets lost at those times. So when we have meetings at Leader Games, I usually tell people I like having the studio be the sort of place where, as our audience grows, instead of us responding to the growth of our audience by saying, well, if we publish twice as many games, we'll make twice as much money, we say, no, our audience is twice as big. We can work for twice as long on our games. And so like our whole gambit, and it's a gambit shared by Whirligig and Leader, is it's like the slow games movement. Like, what if we just make fewer games, and we can really invest a lot of resources in them. And for folks who want more, there are lots of other companies that can serve that.
Absolutely, and we certainly don't want to compete. And Cole, at least you were at Essen, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2019, and you saw how this fair, it's not a convention, how this fair works. Because 30% of the sales, maybe 50%, I have no scientific number, is heavily reduced, discounted copies of games and good games. It's not that the €5 game is a bad game that they need to move. They need to move because they have produced too many, and suddenly a great game is there for a very low price. Is this a good thing? No, of course it's not, and yeah, let's leave it at this maybe. Otherwise, yeah.
Well, I have friends who work for companies like that, and there are virtues to what they're doing too. The fact that games are cheap can also be quite a good thing. But I think it's funny. Drew and I, we made a commitment to a certain kind of business model for Whirligig, and that business model was we should make slightly more expensive games. A lot of our games have MSRPs kind of between $80 and $110 or around there.
Mm.
And our thinking was for the amount of work, research, and the quality of components, that is an equitable price for them. But we know that also cuts people out. So at least at Whirligig, what we've done is we put things into the Creative Commons as we finish them, so that anybody who wants to homebrew their own copy can. I'm not harmed by it at all. And I love to see publishers embrace more open access forms. But there's a lot of value too in building a game company that is built around the $30 game, because that is providing access to people who might not be able to play games.
Of course, there are so many different ways to handle this issue. There is no easy solution, especially looking at how we people work. And I'm not saying not that some people here listening think Uli he's morally superior. No, I'm doing so much bullshit each and every hour or so and. Yeah, well, so maybe we leave it at this for that point. Although we're getting quite a bit of support here in the chat for this. So, John Company, if you think you are interested in this game, check it out. I don't have easy access to although it's probably simpler to find, to the Whirligig website. What I'm putting in the chat window is a Kickstarter page, because Drew, you said that people checking out that page, they will find the late pledge page over there. So if you are interested, if you haven't backed the game, you can still do so here via late pledges. Yeah.
And if you're impatient, if you want to play right now, you can go to the Whirligig Discord, which if you just search Whirligig Discord, you'll find it on Google. And we just have a really active community of players. There's often 2 or 3 games per week. And so it's easy to find players.
Yeah, wonderful. So to wrap this up, Drew and Cole, so what do we have here? We have John Company. So early next year you wrap up this project, maybe after Chinese New Year. So wonderful. Then
I hope when I see people at Gen Con, I'm able to see games of John Company or play. And at BGG Con next year, I want to be playing games of John Company.
And over the next few months, we are only going to have more beautiful snapshots and snippets from the pre-production physical component part. The what's on the Kickstarter is going to be very curious to see what is the final product in comparison. Yeah. And we're thrilled with how this project is shaping up.
Mm-hmm. So excellent. And then for moving over to Leader Games for a second, we know now that probably Q1 of next year there's this science fiction space game from you for Leader Games. So we are really excited. It will be crowdfunded via Kickstarter most probably, if I got this correctly. And then we are looking at Whirligig, back to Whirligig, for more games. So, for example, an Infamous Traffic 2.0 after John Company has been finished, and maybe several other games as well over the coming next few years. So, yeah.
Yep,
And
that's right. We have, uh, when you lay it out like that, it doesn't seem like we're going very slow. But that's just what we're looking over. We're looking over years here. But we've been, yeah, I'm really excited at all the stuff we have coming down the pipe for both companies. And of course, there'll be certainly language localizations for Oath coming up too. And for folks wanting just a quick update, I'll say that all the new root material, all the Root Marauder stuff, is at the printers now, and hopefully we'll be on a boat before Chinese New Year. But it's a close run thing, so who knows?
so very good there as well. So wonderful. And there's more support for an Infamous Traffic for Chris. He's saying an Infamous Traffic with four exclamation marks. So yes, so you see there is a lot of support. Yeah, from my side here, Drew Cole, this was a wonderful conversation. So it's always exciting talking to you. And thank you in the middle of the day, of your day, that you had the time on a Saturday to talk to me, to talk to us. And hopefully, this is my great wish for next year, that we meet in person again. Last time it was BGGCon 2019 when we were sitting together. Maybe I'm right now, nobody knows what next year will be. Right now, I'm planning to attend Origins in June, when it's back to June of next year. Maybe we can play
that sounds lovely.
some nice trick taking 10-minute game, or
Yeah, yeah.
maybe
Oh,
something else. Yeah.
thank you so nice to
Yeah,
chat.
it's really nice talking to you, really.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thank you to all listeners, to all viewers here, and your input was most valuable. And we close up, or I close up, ConWorxx in, let's see, in 17 minutes. So there will be just the outro by me, but you can win 5 games. If you know some stupid answers, no, good answers to stupid questions. So that's a way around it. So if you like, please join me in 17 minutes from now. And otherwise, Drew Cole, have a great day. Thank you. Bye
Thank you
bye.
so much. Bye.
Bye.